Zohran Mamdani wins the New York City. He's now the new mayor. He's 34 years old. And if we look at the demographics, 32% of Jews voted for him, Ileana. And New York City is the Jewish city per se, far before Israel was, right? We know that Jewish Dutch Jewish went to Recife in Brazil, didn't like that, was expelled by the British, and they went to New York and founded New York. So it's the foundation, New York City is Jewish, and a big chunk of the population is Jewish. Now we have 32% of the Jewish, and a huge part of the young generation voting for him. Tell us a little bit about Zohran, how he won.
Okay, so I'm going to sort of separate this into domestically what we can take away from for the New York public itself, and some my thoughts on that, and then also why he won, etc. And then also I'm going to talk about how we should feel about it as anti-imperialists. Okay, so from the global south. So first of all, starting with, I have to say, this is a victory for New York people, all right, New York public. One of the main takeaways we can take from this is that they are hungering for a change. I'm going to show you his platform, which, if I can figure out this technical issue that we're having. But basically, I think what we have to remember here is that he was primarily famous for two things. He ran on basically this, let me take that away. He ran on, so basically he was kind of known for two things here. First of all, he's known for, thank you, Sarah. He's known for being a democratic socialist, which I actually think is an incorrect labeling for him. I don't think he's a democratic socialist.
Why do you think? Well, don't you think, like, when you say I'm a democratic socialist, I'm also trying to pretend I'm not a socialist, and maybe I am, I'm not?
Yeah, I think that's the issue that I'm having with the term democratic socialist, because it suggests an adjective for the noun socialist. And he's not a socialist. He's running as a Democrat. So the most that we can say about him is he's a socialist Democrat, because he's a proud Democrat. And the Democrat Party, the US is a duopoly. I think we all know that. Both the Republican and Democratic parties are part of the establishment, which is part of the US. And the US is the leader of the US empire. It sort of goes back to that. So both parties are going to be imperialist and capitalist. Like, that is absolutely inevitable. When you're caught in this duopoly, there's this feeling like, vote blue no matter who, right? So there's very little between them, and they sort of work as controlled opposition for each other. All right, so that is the limitation of running as a Democrat, but we'll get into what he's actually saying here, which is New York is too expensive. Zohran will lower costs and make life easier. This is what New Yorkers care about. Their lives are too expensive. Their lives are too difficult because of just the lack of affordability. Now, remember, the US does not have universal health care. It has a rising homeless population. It has a drug epidemic. It has so many issues that really the average person is dealing with, and they're in survival mode. So this is a victory for the US people in New York, for the New York people who want some sort of change. This is a temperature check for where they are. It took a lot for them to win this. Even though he's a Democrat, it took a lot for him to win, because there was ranked choice voting in New York, which they don't have ranked choice voting all over the US. So he may not have won in another part of the US, okay? But there's that part of it. All these different social movements came up and supported him, much more socialist movements like PSL. Many people from that came up and supported him. But the thing that really still remains, because he's part of the Democratic Party, it's their work starts now. Their work starts now, because how do you hold this guy accountable? I'm sorry, not to be rude, but how do you hold anyone accountable in the Democratic Party? You need levers of power. And right now, the US is just, the American people feel so exhausted. by their lack of supposed power, which, like I said, is a bit of a myth, but that is the general population's feeling about their government, that the government doesn't work for them. So this is a victory for them. He did win despite pretty big odds, despite being in the Democratic Party, but it is still, we still need to be, this idea, for example, I don't know if you have that one where Sadiq Khan is like, this is a victory for hope. Okay.
We have that. Yeah, we certainly do.
Yeah,
you may need to explain to people who is Sadiq Khan.
Who is Sadiq Khan? He is the mayor of London, and he's also Muslim, and that's basically all I can really say about that. But he's the mayor of London. He's also Muslim, and this is this is his op-ed in Time. So he's making it out as if this is a victory for hope, and of course Sadiq Khan would say that also in the empire, also not really a socialist. It's not really the endorsement he thinks it is, okay? But that brings me to the other point where why it is also kind of a victory is that the other thing about Mamdani is that he was known as not being a Zionist, okay? So that's the thing, is that the bar is so low that all the other candidates, they said the first thing that they would do if they won is to go to Israel. It's like, hello, you were the mayor of New York. Why would that be the first thing that you would do? And only Mamdani was like, well, actually, there's a lot to do here in New York. I'm focusing on New York. So, so what I think that can tell us is this Zionist mosque that has been used to justify and cover for imperial crimes in Palestine, to cover for genocide in Palestine, it is slipping even in the US. And the US just sort of, shockingly, the rest of the world, I think, can already see through this Zionist mosque. But the US is only in the last 2 years that this mosque actually slipped.
Ileana, do you think that the fact that 30% of the Jews voted in New York, New York is not representative for the US, but it's representative for the vanguard of the US and the vanguard of many things in the world. But I know you will dispute it totally, but in the US, it's definitely a vanguard. And why do you think this 30% of Jews voted for Muslim? This is almost impossible to think, because the US ran a Islamophobic campaign that began on September 11. After September 11, all Muslims were terrorists and rapists. How come today, in this day and age, where you have 30% of the Jews voting for a Muslim, a proud Muslim from Africa? How do you explain that?
I mean, I think because we should not also be racist and think that all Jews are genocidal, anti-intellectual, psychotic people, right? Like, that is what Zionism suggests. Zionism, by conflating Judaism and Jewish people with Zionism, is saying that about all Jews. I mean, if I was Jewish, I would be outraged at this characterization.
Yeah.
It's horrific. So, I mean, I think we can say that, the other thing too is that the demographic of Jews in New York, I don't have the statistics, but they're well known to be, middle class, upper middle class. I mean, It's not really the oppressed minority, the uneducated, ignorant minority. So, that is part of the thing. This is common sense.
And you know what? They haven't seen in pictures for the past 2 years a genocide 24/7. And I think they don't want to be accomplice. There are a lot of Jews that they don't feel they are accomplice to Israel. And I think the Israeli propaganda is cracking. If you see MAGA, hardcore MAGA, let's say commentators just like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, Megan Riley, and Megan Right. So these people, they are speaking out against Israel. They are against this genocide. They don't want make Israel great again. They want to make America great again. So I think there is within the Republican Party and especially the youth, people don't want to be accomplice to that. I think
and they are. I mean, they are.
This is a win against the Zionist lobby who puts loads of money to elect the opposition, whoever there is. There is a show where Mamdani is being argued by a panel of Zionist journalists asking, would you go to Israel? He says, no, I will go first to the synagogues in New York, because this is the place that I have the mandate for. Where is your first place that you would go? Everyone else saying, Cuomo saying, we're going to go to Israel.
Okay.
So it was a Jewish massive Zionist. And when I see Mamdani's victory, I think it's a clear sign that Israel propaganda, New York, no longer.
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely showing the slipping of the mask, like I said before. But in terms of foreign policy, he is just the mayor of New York. Let's just remember that.
Yeah, you're right.
Switching over kind of to, as an anti-imperialist, how do we consume this? What do we take away from this? Again, this America, of course, I shouldn't even say America, the US, of course, is just very much thinks it's the center of the universe. And fair enough, in the media landscape, it is the center of the universe because they do spend billions of dollars on their propaganda. So in terms of what can we look at from Zohran Mamdani for foreign policy, first of all, he's just the mayor of New York. However, he's still significant because the Democratic Party is pretty desperate to go up against Trump, right? And so even though he's just the mayor of New York, his name is still in the conversation for who could be the next presidential candidate against Trump. Like, they are already considering him as like a potential new Democratic presidential candidate. And also they're hoping that his win will sort of create not a landslide, but like will influence other elections.
A wave of different independent candidates that will be swallowed by the system at some point, but will at least prompt something new.
Yeah, let's be very clear. This is not about independent. This is not independent. This is Democrat, socialist, but non-pro-Zionist socialist. Well, not socialist, but kind of socialist policy Democrat. Non-Zionist wave of new candidates. This is the hope, right? This is definitely the hope. So we can see that this might actually be an interesting thing for the Democratic Party to grab hold of. And this is where it gets a little bit more dicey for anti-imperialists and for us in the Global South to pay attention to, because as we can remember, like I said initially, the Democratic Party is part of the U.S. empire. It is the establishment party of the U.S. empire. Its main focus is to further imperialist agendas, okay? So if they can use Mamdani or people like Mamdani to cover a new ethical mosque for imperialism, that is very dangerous, because remember, Obama had this veneer about him, and it was actually much easier. Easier is something else, but his policies, his foreign policies, his U.S. sanctions. I recently just talked to the Venezuelan editor of Orinoco Tribune, Jesus Rodriguez Espinoza. He is the co-founder and editor of Orinoco Tribune, and he was talking about how it's the 2015 U.S. sanctions that was under Obama that has really caused this incredible impoverishment of Venezuela. Now they have 70% poverty rate, down from 27% under Hugo Chavez. So we have to remember that imperialism has this very long arm, very long reach, and if they have an effective mosque like Zohran Mamdani, who we are primed to like, okay? We're primed to like. And this is why we have to just be much more vigilant as anti-imperialists, or as people who care about humanity. Because let's look at this interview he did right before he got elected, but he basically was being accused of being a communist, and to to defend himself, he's let me just show you this. Do you know where it is?
I know what you want to.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Venezuela and how they really stand as true imperialists. Yeah.
Yeah. He gave this interview, his podcast, to address the smears. Because remember, in the US, if you're a communist or a socialist, that is a huge smear against you. And this was his response to that allegation. So if you can see here, he says, I want to be clear on where I stand. I believe both Nicolas Maduro and Miguel Diaz-Canel are dictators. Their administrations have stifled free and fair elections, jailed political opponents, and suppressed the free and fair press. And yet our federal government's long history of punitive policies towards both countries, including extrajudicial killings of Venezuelans and the continuation of a decades-long blockade of Cuba, have only worsened these conditions. Democratic socialism is about dignity, justice, and accountability, etc. So I think of this as the propaganda sandwich. Okay, so right up the top, he comes out swinging with huge propaganda against Nicolas Maduro and Diaz-Canel, calling them dictators. These are the CIA talking points against socialist countries. This is what they talk, they assert against these head of states in order to justify infiltration and justify invasions and regime change. This is the exact rhetoric that they use.
Perfect. And then, you know what? This is where now we understand what this strange neologism, democratic socialist, comes, right? He wants to say, well, I'm very different from Maduro. I'm very different from Miguel Diaz-Canel. I am a democratic. That means I am a capitalistic neoliberal, and I think socialism is compatible with that. I am an American. And as you say, CIA talking points, because in America, people are brainwashed about the realities in South America, the realities in China, in Russia. There's, since the Cold War is brainwashed about words like communism, socialism. These are stigmatizing words. Revolutionary, radicals. These are CIA talking points, and the press. We need to think that the CIA is massively present in the press. MI6 is massively present in the press. We've seen this in the case of Julian Assange. When he wanted to release the cables, the department, I think it was the State Department, wants to have an editorial authority over what is being said in the press. So they do hold an editorial authority of what the press can say and cannot. And that's how you build opinion. At school, you don't study history. In the UK, people study history until they are 13. They know nothing about their empire. They just see the glory, Prince William, Prince Harry, Lady Di. That's how they grow up. They don't touch the dirt part of their history and create a lot of fantasies, a lot of fantastic enemies, and I think phantasmagoric ideas about the world.
Yeah, exactly. So, from an anti-imperialist point of view, I think this is more from the outside. We just have to be vigilant about this sort of thing, because Mamdani could very well be used to clean up the propaganda, to give it a genteel face again to US propaganda. So we have to be careful. And also, in terms of hope, I would just say this much, Sadiq Khan getting hope or whatever this, if you are in the global south and you want hope, do not look at the global north. They're not the ones that are making the achievements for humanity. They're the ones that are opposing achievement for humanity. If you want hope, Look at the Sahel states, look at Burkina Faso, what they're doing there. Look at China, for God's sake. China has done such an amazing job in terms of lifting up 800 million people from absolute poverty. The expansion of so many policies that they have in China really is more of a Marxist socialist.
Look at the effervescence of the revolutionary movements in South America, in Africa, for instance.
Yes. And also, I talked about this.
People free to think and talk.
Exactly. Like, I think it's really important that we don't forget these revolutionary movements that were genuinely revolutionary. I mean, I just talked about Venezuela, and the thing that is just so infuriating about the situation, and it's more than infuriating, but like I said, in 2015, the Obama US sanctions caused this this cascade of economic issues that they've had, and now they have a 70% poverty level. But Hugo Chavez, during his presidency, he managed to get the poverty rate from 50% to 27%. So we're talking about, it takes so much to do that sort of thing. And I know Lula in Brazil also greatly reduced poverty as well. So we have to be looking at the global south really for examples of what human progress looks like. Don't look at the global north. They're specifically primed against human progress. And also, we have to remember that, like, there's a reason why Americans, the US public generally, are seen as so ignorant. It's because, they're being purposefully made ignorant via their institutions, via their whole infrastructure, just like the propaganda that we consume. They consume more because their entire ecosystem is from, the belly of the beast. So
I thought you would say because of their ego system.
They do also have an ego.
It's the ego of the empire. It's just really dummy.
It is true. It is definitely true. That is one of their number one problems.